"Old man, move it." A young biker spat, rolled his eyes, and then, without warning, swung a fist that sent the elderly veteran crashing to the concrete floor of the gas station. The 80-year-old man had simply asked to form a line like everyone else. No one intervened until, 30 minutes later, two dark SUVs bearing military plates rumbled into view. The first door opened to reveal the police chief, his son. "What do you think of the biker's actions? Was it unfair?" Leave a comment with, "Not unfair." To stand for honor and justice. Edward. Eddie, Malone's Tuesday morning routine hadn't changed in a decade and a half. He rose before dawn, smoothed his neatly pressed button down, combed his thinning white hair, and fastened his tarnished Korean War veteran's badge to his left breast pocket. Though the small silver pin had dulled over the years, Eddie polished it each night before bed, a ritual as steady as his resolve. At 80 his steps were slower, but each movement carried the same deliberate dignity that had carried him through frozen hills and battlefield smoke. His pride and joy, aside from the medal, was his 1998 Bic Century kept in pristine condition. No drive was too short to skip a careful polish or oil change. Every Tuesday and Friday he motored exactly 3 miles to Miller's gas station, a place he called old-fashioned, with manual pumps and a bell that dinged when you pulled in. The newer stations lack character, he'd often say. Miller's reminds me of simpler times. That particular Tuesday morning hinted at autumn. A crisp breeze flickered the American flag limp above the pumps. Eddie eased his book into line behind 2 idling cars. Nearby, 5 motorcycles stood parked haphazardly near the store's entrance. Their riders, young men in worn leather jackets adorned with unknown patches, laughed loudly and passed around energy drinks, blocking the entryway. When Eddie stepped from his Bic, his knees protested, but he'd learned to push through pain long ago. He reached for the pump's handle, but the bikers' raucous voices rose. Clearing his throat, he called out politely, "Excuse me, could you please form a line?" A tall biker, no older than 25, with a neck tattoo and a pierced eyebrow, whirled around. "What's it to you, old man?" he sneered. Eddie straightened as much as his stooped frame allowed. "Common courtesy," he replied evenly. "We're all trying to get on with our day." A snort escaped the biker. "Who talks like that?" he mocked. Eddie's expression never wavered. "I'm simply asking for a bit of respect," he said softly. "We're all waiting." The biker's lips curled into a contemptuous grin. "Mind your own business," he shot back. Another biker joined in. "You're too old to be telling anyone what to do." Nearby, a mother with 2 small children and an elderly couple pumping gas paused to watch. The teen attendant inside the convenience store hovered behind the counter, eyes wide. Eddie's voice stayed calm. "I'm not ordering you around, just being mindful." The tall biker stepped forward, looming over Eddie. "For being old," he snarled. Eddie's hand brushed his veteran's pin. "I shed blood so you could stand here and speak your mind," he said quietly. "That's all I ask." A moment of silence fell. For a brief instant, the biker's expression flickered with recognition, then hardened again. "Yeah, save me the service speech," he replied loudly. "Go back to your nursing home and bore somebody else with your war stories." Eddie didn't answer. He turned back to the pump. Maybe his silence provoked the biker more than words ever could. Or perhaps it was the quiet dignity Eddie radiated. An echo of trenches and enemy fire. Whatever the reason, the biker lunged. He shoved Eddie's shoulder, spinning him around. Before anyone could react, he landed a punch on the side of Eddie's head. It wasn't a powerful blow. He didn't need one. It sent Eddie stumbling backward, feet tangling, as he fell hard onto the concrete. His head slammed against the pump's base with a sickening crack. Blood immediately seeped from a gash on his temple, forming a crimson pool on the gray concrete. The gas station fell dead silent. The biker, shocked at what he'd done, stepped back. Phones emerged from pockets, bystanders began recording, but no one moved to help. "Hey!" "He got in my face," the biker stammered. Though Eddie had done nothing to threaten him, Eddie lay still, vision blurring. At 80, even a fall like this could be dire. But he'd survived worse. Slowly, he rolled onto his side, pushed himself up to a sitting position. Blood trickled down his cheek, dark against his clean shirt. He touched the wound gingerly, wincing, but didn't cry out. The attendant finally crept out from behind the counter, clutching a roll of paper towels, but froze several feet away. Eddie didn't look at the biker or anyone else. He retrieved a crisp, white handkerchief embroidered with his initials, his late wife's gift, and pressed it to his temple. Using the pump for support, he hauled himself to his feet without a word. No plea, no cry for help, just the silence of someone disciplined by war. Blood soaked through the handkerchief as Eddie leaned against the pump, breathing in short, measured bursts. a technique he'd learned long ago to manage pain. The bikers' earlier arrogance had vanished. They stood frozen, as if unsure how to proceed. A woman's voice finally broke the hush. Someone should call an ambulance. Still, no one moved. Their collective guilt of inaction was paralyzing, all except one man. A blue pickup truck rolled to an empty pump. The driver, broad-shouldered, in his early 30s, face weathered by years of labor, stepped out. He surveyed the scene, the bloodied handkerchief, the group of bikers sinking back toward their bikes, and the ring of bystanders holding their phones. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked, moving swiftly toward Eddie. Eddie nodded faintly. "I'm fine, son," he said, voice steady. "Just a scratch." The truck driver, whose name tag read Caleb, frowned at the growing stain. "That's more than a scratch," he said as he guided Eddie to a plastic chair outside the store. He knelt, pulled a small first aid kit from his truck, and began to clean the wound with gentle precision. "I know who you are," Caleb said softly. "You spoke at last year's Memorial Day service. My grandfather served in Korea too." Eddie's eyes, clouded with age but still alert, studied Caleb. "McNamara. You're Robert McNamara's grandson." Caleb nodded, surprised. "I remember all of them," Eddie said. By then, the bikers had retreated to their motorcycles, casting uneasy glances at Eddie and Caleb. The tallest biker, the one who had punched Eddie, flitted from foot to foot, guilt and fear warring on his face. "I'm calling the police," Caleb announced, pulling out his phone. "And I've got your license plate numbers." He looked directly at the bikers. Eddie laid a hand on Caleb's arm. "No need to make a fuss. I've survived worse in foxholes across 2 continents. One punch won't change who I am." But Caleb had already punched the number in. "Chief Malone, this is Caleb McNamara. I'm at Miller's gas station with your father. There's been an incident." The bikers overheard and paled. "Malone, your son's police chief?" "Yes, sir. He's fine, but there's a lot of blood here. They're still here." "Got it, sir." After hanging up, Caleb turned back to Eddie. "Your son's on his way. He was nearby on a training exercise." Eddie sighed. "Thomas is overprotective. No need to interrupt his work because of an old man's scrape." Caleb began photographing the scene. Shots of the bikers and their plates. The station attendant, finally finding courage, brought out bottles of water and fresh towels. "Mr. Malone, I'm so sorry," he said, voice trembling. "I should have done something. I froze." Eddie took the young man's hand. "Fear is natural. What matters is learning from it. Next time you'll do better." The elderly couple who had watched the confrontation approached. The woman's eyes were damp. "We should have helped," she whispered. "We all just stood there." Eddie nodded. "Sometimes standing witness is its own form of courage," he replied. "The world needs those who remember what happened, even if they couldn't stop it." More customers arrived, sensing something had gone awry. Whispers spread quickly. The bikers became visibly uneasy, straddling their motorcycles as if ready to flee. Caleb called out to them. "I wouldn't run if I were you. That'll only make things worse." The leader of the group hesitated, still on his bike. "He got in my face," he said, defensive. "I just reacted." Eddie remained silent, dabbing at his wound. His quiet resolve unsettled the biker more than any accusation. "Say something," the biker growled. "Threaten me with your police chief, son." "Do something." Eddie looked up, eyes clear and unwavering. "What would you have me say?" he asked. "That I hate you. I don't. That I fear you. I don't. I faced men in Korea who prayed for my death. Men who thought I didn't deserve to live. You're a young man who lost his temper." The biker's posture wavered. Eddie continued. "You hit me. You see me bleeding, that's your doing. And you'll have to live with that knowledge. Perhaps that's punishment enough." The crowd fell silent, absorbing every word. No one in the group noticed the 2 black SUVs rolling to a stop until their engines idled ominously. Bystanders stepped back, forming a wider circle. The bikers froze. From the first UV, a driver's door swung open. A broad-shouldered man in his early 40s emerged, wearing the crisp uniform of the county police chief. Thomas Malone's face, familiar in structure, younger and resolute, showed no emotion as he took in the scene: his father's bloodied temple, the silent crowd, the bikers. He approached without haste, flanked by 2 military officers in battle dress. 1 man, 1 woman, each bearing lieutenant insignia. Their trained, synchronized steps reinforced the weight of authority. Thomas didn't rush to his father's side. Instead, he stopped before the bikers, resting a hand on his holstered sidearm, a reminder, not a threat. "Which one of you assaulted Edward Malone, Korean War veteran, military advisor in Vietnam, Silver Star recipient, and my father?" His voice carried across the station. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances. None dared step forward. "Let me rephrase. Thomas said, tone colder. Which one of you struck my father in the face? Silence stretched tautly. Traffic on the nearby road seemed to quiet in deference. Finally, the tallest biker took a hesitant step forward. Sir, it was a misunderstanding, he stammered. 16 people recorded your misunderstanding. 3 security cameras caught it from different angles. Thomas replied, voice controlled. The biker swallowed, eyes flicking to friends. I lost my temper. He was telling us to move. Thomas's expression didn't change. Does that justify violence against an elderly man who fought for your freedom? Before the biker could answer, the female lieutenant stepped forward. Captain Malone trained half my unit in survival techniques last year. Men and women younger and stronger than you. Sat for hours listening to him. He never raised his voice. Thomas turned away from the bikers to kneel beside Eddie, examining the wound. You're late, Thomas, Eddie murmured, a hint of a wry smile in his old man voice. I told you those new SUVs were too flashy. Thomas shook his head, relief softening his features. I told you to stop picking fights with men a quarter your age. Eddie's voice was measured. I didn't pick any fight. I just asked for respect. Caleb spoke up. He was nothing but respectful. Eddie raised a hand, silencing him. It doesn't matter. What's done is done. Thomas helped his father to his feet. Medical's on the way. They'll check you for a concussion. Eddie waved off the concern. I've had harder knocks falling out of bed. A lieutenant approached Eddie, extending a hand. Captain Malone, it's an honor. The base commander had requested Eddie's presence the next morning. He wants to recognize your contributions to our training programs, naming our new tactical facility after you. Eddie's eyebrows shot up. That's unnecessary. Lieutenant Rodriguez joined in. It's long overdue. Thomas finally turned back to the bikers. Expression steeled. I'll need statements from all of you. If you assaulted Captain Malone, you face felony charges. The biker who'd punched Eddie managed to step forward. Sir, I want to apologize. I didn't mean to hurt him. Thomas cut him off. Save it for the judge. Striking an elderly veteran is a felony. Eddie stepped toward the group, small frame commanding sudden attention. Young man, he addressed the biker directly. Do you know what we fought for in Korea? The biker shook his head. Freedom. Eddie replied simply. Not just for Americans, but for those we'd never meet. People who didn't look like us or speak our language. We believed all humans deserve dignity and respect. He paused, hand on his veteran's pin. I don't want you punished. I want you to understand what this pin represents. He turned to Lieutenant Chen. What's the name of the volunteer program we discussed? Lieutenant Chen straightened. The Veterans Outreach Initiative. We're renovating the community center on the east side to create a gathering place for veterans in need. Eddie nodded. My son won't press charges on behalf of the county. But, he raised a finger, if you commit to 60 hours there, you'll work beside men and women who served this country. You'll hear their stories. You'll understand why that punch was about more than an old man asking you to wait your turn. Thomas watched but didn't seem entirely convinced. He nodded slowly. Lieutenant Rodriguez will take your information. If you fail to complete even 1 hour, charges will be reinstated. The biker, eyes lowered, looked at Eddie. I'll do it. And sir, he addressed Eddie, I truly am sorry. Eddie studied him. I believe you are. That's a start. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward. Captain Malone, we also need your statements for another matter. Eddie squinted. Another matter. Lieutenant Chen offered a smile. The base commander thinks it's time to properly recognize your contributions. He's requesting your presence tomorrow to announce naming the new facility in your honor. Eddie's surprise was genuine. The first hint of it all morning. Well, I never expected that. Lieutenant Rodriguez chimed in. It's about time. One month later, Miller's gas station looked transformed. Red, white, and blue bunting draped the weathered building. Folding chairs filled the parking lot where cars and motorcycles once sat. A stage stood near the entrance, the podium bearing the U.S. Army seal. Eddie Malone sat in the front row, awkwardly adjusting his tie. He'd protested the fuss, but Thomas insisted, and when Thomas set his mind to something, he was as stubborn as his father. This is unnecessary, Eddie muttered. Thomas, in his dress uniform, smiled. This isn't about the incident. It's about 60 years of service that went uncelebrated. The crowd reflected the community veterans in service caps, young families, police officers, teachers, store clerks. In the back row, seated apart, were 5 men in clean button-down shirts. The bikers, sans leather jackets, sat quietly. At precisely 10 o'clock, a color guard from the nearby base marched forward, presenting the flag with crisp precision. The base commander, A stern colonel with a chest full of ribbons approached the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today not only to honor a man but to recognize a principle increasingly rare in our society: quiet dignity in the face of disrespect." As the commander recounted Eddie's military record and decades of community service, Miller, the station's owner, beamed from near the store entrance. He'd replaced the faded sign overnight. It now read Malone Station, a place of honor. Caleb McNamara sat beside his grandfather, tears glistening as stories of Eddie's exploits in Korea were shared. Many tales Eddie had never spoken aloud. The commander concluded, "It is my privilege to present Edward Eddie Malone with this commendation from the Secretary of the Army." Recognizing his lifelong service both in uniform and as a civilian, Eddie stood, smaller than ever, dwarfed by the microphone and oversized seal. But when he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the lot. "I don't deserve this," he began. "I was just one of many who answered the call. The true heroes never came home." He paused, locking eyes on the 5 bikers in the back. "Character is what you do when no one's watching. Honor is how you respond when everyone's watching you be mistreated." The crowd hushed. Eddie continued, "1 month ago, a young man made a mistake here. Since then, he has worked alongside veterans at our community center. He listened to our stories. He has shown true remorse. Not just with words but with actions." He gestured to the leader of the bikers, who rose uncertainly. "James, would you join me?" A murmur passed through the audience as the young man climbed the steps and stood beside Eddie. "This young man has completed not 60, but 120 hours of service," Eddie announced. "He has learned that respect isn't about age or uniform. It's about recognizing the humanity in each of us." James cleared his throat, voice shaking. "Captain Malone gave me a second chance. I didn't deserve it. My friends and I are enlisting next month. We want to earn the respect we should have shown from the start." A fresh wave of applause rippled through the crowd. Thomas looked at his father, pride shining in his eyes. After the ceremony, as people mingled over coffee and pastries, Miller unveiled a framed photograph to hang inside the station: a younger Eddie Malone, standing at attention beside his unit in Korea. Below it, a plaque read, "Honor isn't just fought for on battlefields. Sometimes it's defended at gas stations." Eddie slipped away to his book to catch his breath. As he sat behind the wheel, a knock came at the window. Caleb and his grandfather, the elderly veteran, approached. "Miss Malone," Caleb called gently. Eddie rolled down the window. Robert McNamara, using a cane but standing tall in his old uniform, saluted sharply. "Staff Sergeant Malone, Hill 209, November 1952. You carried me a mile through sniper fire after I took shrapnel in both legs. I never got to thank you properly." Recognition flashed across Eddie's face. "Private McNamara, you made it home." Robert saluted again. "Thanks to you," Caleb added. "And now I'm still fighting the good fight. Still standing up for what's right." Eddie smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that erased decades from his face. "I'm not fighting anymore," he said, "just reminding people what we fought for." As Eddie drove home that afternoon, he passed the newly renamed Malone Station. Miller was already back to pumping gas. But something had changed. Customers now lingered, chatting instead of rushing. A new, larger flag fluttered proudly above the pumps. On the freshly painted wall near the entrance, bold letters proclaimed, "Respect is earned. Honor is given. Both must be preserved." Below, smaller script read, "Not everyone who wears a uniform is a hero, but those who maintain dignity in the face of disrespect truly deserve our deepest respect." Leave a comment, respect, to show you stand for gratitude and justice. Subscribe to Ray Williams Stories for more stories that touch the heart.